after the cross, did Jesus really go to hell? It sounds like something out of a movie, but this question has spanned centuries, stirred the faith of millions, and even appears in one of Christianity's oldest creeds, leaving many people confused, full of doubt, and sometimes even afraid. But what if the answer isn't about terror, but about victory, hope, and meaning for life today? Let's travel through history, the Bible, and the ideas of past thinkers to discover what this phrase really meant. Separate fact from interpretation, and understand how it changes the way we face death and the future. When we hear the word hell, the imagination runs wild, full of fire, screams, and eternal punishment. However, in the ancient world, especially in Jesus' time, the scenario was quite different. The Hebrew Bible spoke of Sheol, and the New Testament used Hades, terms that pointed to the realm of the dead, the common place where everyone went when they died, whether righteous or unrighteous. It wasn't a flaming courtroom, but a kind of silent border between life and the unknown. The Apostles' Creed, formulated in the early centuries of Christianity, inherits exactly this ancient vocabulary. Therefore, when it says that Jesus descended into hell, it is not talking about punishment, but about real death. In other words, Jesus entered where every human being enters when they die. This reading didn't emerge from nowhere. Church fathers like Irenaeus of Lyons and Tertullian already spoke of this place of the dead as part of Christ's complete human experience. Contemporary projects explain this using a simple image: death as a dark valley that no one crosses alone until someone returns from there. Thus, the descent does not point to additional suffering, but to radical solidarity with the human condition. Jesus didn't stay hovering above death. He stepped exactly where everyone steps, and it is precisely there that the story begins to get more intriguing, because this descent does not appear in isolation. It occupies a very specific place in an ancient confession of faith. Now imagine the Apostles' Creed as a very lean timeline, almost like a summarized script of Jesus' life. It says that Christ suffered, was crucified, died, was buried, descended into hell, and on the third day rose again from the dead. Nothing there is out of place by chance, because this text was born between the 2nd and 4th centuries to teach, in a simple way, the heart of the Christian faith. Historians like J.N.D. Kelly show that every phrase was thought out to avoid confusion. If descended into hell were just another way of saying he died, it would be repeating the same thing twice. And ancient creeds do not waste words. It is precisely because it comes after the burial and before the resurrection that the phrase gains its own weight. It points to something that happens in the silent interval between the Friday of the cross and the Sunday of the empty tomb. Like a movie that cuts the scene and leaves the audience in suspense, the creed suggests that there was movement when everything seemed still. Theologians throughout history have noticed this, because the order protects both logic and the message. First death, then entry into the realm of the dead, and only then the victory of the resurrection. This sequence creates expectation, like footsteps echoing in a dark hallway. Not every explanation that sounds beautiful stands up when we look closely, and here is no different. A common idea says that descended into hell is just a poetic way of stating that Jesus really died. However, as we saw in the Creed, death and burial are already there, very clear. Another reading associated with John Calvin in the 16th century suggests that this descent happened on the cross when Christ suffered the weight of divine judgment. The problem is that this shifts the phrase from the place where it is in the Creed. Instead of something after death, it becomes just a description of suffering before it. And then, the sequence loses its meaning. Scholars like Wayne Grudem, in his systematic theology, call attention precisely to this historical and textual inconsistency. If the descent were just a synonym for dying, why would ancient Christians preserve the phrase for so many centuries? And if it were just the suffering on the cross, why place it after the burial? These interpretations even try to protect important truths, such as the reality of Jesus' death and the intensity of his pain, but they end up not explaining why this stage appears as something distinct. It's like trying to fit a wrong piece into a puzzle. It even resembles the shape, but it doesn't complete the picture. And when the pieces don't fit, it's a sign that perhaps there is a larger image waiting to be revealed. What if instead of a place of defeat, that silent realm had become a stage for an announcement? Many Christians of the first centuries believed exactly that Jesus, after dying, entered the world of the dead to proclaim that the battle was won. Ancient writings like the homily on Holy Saturday, attributed to 4th century authors, describe Christ awakening Adam and Eve as if to say, "Wake up, freedom has arrived." It wasn't a mass rescue mission nor a second chance at salvation, but a public declaration of victory. The cross had already done the work, now it was time to announce the result. Like a messenger crossing the field after the war, Jesus carried the news that the enemy had fallen. This idea echoes in theologians like Thomas Aquinas in the Summa Theologica, when speaking of Christ's triumph over death and spiritual powers. The focus is not on pain, but on authority. He enters the territory that seemed final and shows that it is not. For those who hear this story today, it's like seeing the light turn on at the end of a tunnel that everyone fears to cross. The descent becomes a sign that not even death is ownerless land. Jesus does not go as a prisoner, but as a winner. And when this image takes hold, another inevitable question arises. What does this say about the human experience of death itself, that he chose to live to the end? Stop for a second and think, what does it actually mean to die? For most biblical traditions, death is the separation between body and soul, something every human being faces, and that is exactly what Christians affirm about Jesus. In the Gospels, as in Luke 23, we read that he commits his spirit to the Father, while his lifeless body remains on the cross. Ancient theologians, like Athanasius of Alexandria in the 4th century, insisted that Christ assumed humanity completely, without shortcuts. It wasn't a facade death nor a divine theater. It was the same rupture that hits anyone. By descending into the realm of the dead, his human soul travels the common path of us all. At the same time, this soul never separates from its divine nature, a mystery that the Christian faith has tried to explain since the ancient councils, such as Chalcedon in the year 451. It's like red-hot iron. It remains iron, but it is united with fire. Thus, Jesus lives death to the bottom of the pit, without ceasing to be who he is. This idea gives weight to the statement that he knows the human condition from the inside, including in the most feared moment. He is not just someone who talks about death, he is someone who has gone through it. And when we accept this, the gaze inevitably turns to the tomb, that concrete place where the body remained, while silence seemed to reign. Silence, a rolled stone, haste before sunset. This is how the Gospels describe the burial scene. Joseph of Arimathea, a member of the Sanhedrin, and Nicodemus, mentioned in John 19, care for Jesus' body with linen and spices, as was Jewish custom. It is not an unimportant detail because it shows that he not only died, but was treated like any dead person of the time. Historians like Raymond Brown, in The Death of the Messiah, remind us that this care reinforces the physical reality of death. The body doesn't vanish, doesn't disappear, doesn't become a symbol. It is placed in a new tomb carved out of rock. There begins the heaviest Sabbath in Christian history. During this time, Jesus remains in the so-called state of death, an expression used by theologians to indicate that death was not just an instant, but a real condition, albeit temporary. It's like the deep pause between two notes in a piece of music. Everything seems still, but the melody is not over yet. For the first disciples, that sounded like the end of all hope. For those reading today, it is proof that there was no trick, no quick way out. The Son of God stayed where the dead stay. And it is precisely from this place of apparent defeat that soon the most surprising announcement will emerge, sustained by ancient texts that try to give words to what happened in this interval. Open the Bible and the mood changes, because some texts sound like windows into that mysterious interval. In the first letter of Peter, chapter 3, verse 19, we read that Christ went and proclaimed his message to the spirits in prison, a short phrase that has generated rivers of ink over the centuries. In the same book, chapter 4, verse 6, the idea appears that the gospel was preached even to the dead, so that they might live according to God. Meanwhile, Paul, in Ephesians chapter 4, speaks of Jesus descending to the lower regions of the earth before ascending in glory. Bible commentaries like those of N.T. Wright remind us that these passages are not simple, but point to something beyond the grave. It's not mathematical proof, but a set of clues scattered in the text. From the early centuries, people like Clement of Alexandria and Origen tried to link these verses to the tradition of the descent, seeing in them an echo of Christ's victory in the realm of the dead. At the same time, modern scholars admit there is debate, there are limits, and no one should pretend absolute certainty. It's like putting together a mosaic with old and worn pieces where the figure appears but never becomes totally clear. Still, when these texts are read together, they form a coherent picture with the idea of the proclamation of victory. The Bible does not describe the scene in detail, but suggests that something happened in that silence between death and resurrection. And if this is true, then the story ceases to be just doctrine and begins to touch real life, bringing direct consequences for those who face their own finitude. If Jesus entered the territory of death and returned, then death is no longer a dead end, but a path with a guaranteed return. In the book of Revelation, chapter 1, Christ says he has the keys of death and Hades, a strong image of authority over what scares humanity most. Pastors and theologians throughout history, such as Augustine of Hippo, use this idea to console communities wounded by persecution and loss. It's not empty talk, it's a promise anchored in an event. Someone crossed the dark valley and reappeared on the other side. Like a guide who knows the dangerous trail, Jesus doesn't point from afar, he goes ahead. This changes the way we face the end. Fear gives way to confidence, even though questions remain. In daily practice, this hope becomes strength to face grief, illness, and goodbyes without pretending they don't hurt. Churches, since the early centuries, repeat this message in funerals and prayers. Death does not have the last word. It's like planting a seed in a harsh winter, believing that spring is coming even when everything seems dead. Christ's descent and victory say that darkness has a deadline, and if he passed through there before, then no one who trusts him walks alone. This isn't just a beautiful idea. It's an invitation to live with courage now, in light of a future we don't yet fully see. And so the question remains that echoes to this day. If death has been conquered, what still prevents us from living with hope? And so, after crossing centuries of history, ancient texts, debates, and such strong images, the initial question echoes again. Did Jesus really descend into hell? We have seen that for the Christian faith, this does not speak of terror, but of solidarity with human death and of a victory announced in the place that seemed final. It's not just a theological curiosity, it's a lens to see life itself. If even death was visited and conquered, perhaps no valley is too deep for hope. In the end, more than knowing exactly how this descent was, the invitation remains to think about what it means today. And you, in the face of your own shadows and fears, do you believe that light can still exist on the other side?